First of all, I'd like to thank you for dedicating your time to participate in this discussion. And I'd like to ask you, what motivated you to study the work of Black abolitionists and in particular works of Frederick Douglass? I don't think that he's very popular in ex-Yugoslav or Serbian political science.
Thank you for having me. Actually, maybe it came as an accident. 15 years ago, I was studying as an exchange student at the University of Wisconsin, Eau Claire. That was 2004, 2005. And I had this amazing opportunity that I only later discovered was really, how to say, I was grateful to have it, to be taught by Professor Peter Myers. And during his, I had 2 courses with him, and one of them was American Political Thought. So coming from Faculty of Political Sciences in Belgrade, when I was, my idea of political thought when it comes to the United States was, Federalists, the War of Independence, and how it was explained by the communal and political leaders of the time. So it was basically white political thought, more or less. And he mentioned Frederick Douglass, which when I would think about Black political thought, I thought it was a very narrow stream of thought that is not particularly important for the, let's say, body of knowledge of political thought in general. Before I heard of Douglass, and later on about other thinkers. And Douglass struck me with the simplicity of his main message, let's say. And it was, white folks, you wrote the laws. I mean, I'm paraphrasing, of course.
Yeah.
You wrote the laws for your republic, and we are part of it, so whether you like it or not. American Blacks, free and slaves, because Douglass was born in slavery himself. And if you want us to participate in your community, you have to apply your roles to everybody, because Thomas Jefferson wrote in the Declaration of Independence that all men are equal, without any brackets and any amendments or pauses saying that men only apply to white Americans or to Anglo-Saxon settlers and so on. So this is how it started. And then I read 3 autobiographies of Frederick Douglass. I started getting more interested in his work and his speeches and texts and so on. I just naturally got drawn into it. And after Douglass, I started studying the rest of African-American political thinkers.
What do you think about his ideas on equality, on feminism, because he was way ahead of his time? In the context of current turmoil and racially and socially motivated unrest in the United States, which started even during Obama, and they continued especially during Trump administration. How fashionable, how actual are messages of Douglass in 2020?
I think they're very important, and I think maybe contrary to what people would say on first glance, is that he would personally be very much against the political demands of Black Lives Matter in particular. Douglass was for equality. His idea was that equality should not be domination of one group of men in particular against the other. And his main idea after emancipation was, he actually said it that way, let us alone. So what he wanted was the equality of opportunities, not the equality of outcomes. It's a really good question whether he would support or not even some older policies such as positive discrimination and things like that, because he even said in one text, if you see a Negro fall, let him fall. That was at the time that was the word that was common, and it wasn't politically engaged as it is today. And Douglass also believed that over time there will be even a biological evolution where basically all Americans, regardless of their background, will eventually become a part of what he used to call a blended race. So he said this is not this is not a mandatory demand, but it will happen regardless. I don't think that this happened so far, and most probably it won't. But certainly there is something called a blended race. Actually, most of African Americans today also have ancestry outside of Africa, especially because of the history, because of the severe history of slavery. Because as you know, there was a lot of sexual exploitation of African American slaves, and Douglass himself is the son of a white slave master, and his mother who was a slave. So I think that that Douglass would be very upset about the loss of consensus, let's say, in the American society. Something that 30 or more years ago, actually, Henry Kissinger wrote in his Diplomacy. He said that the turning point was the Vietnam War and 1968 in particular, and that was a time when America started fighting against itself. Because for the first time, as he thinks in history, Americans were not on the same page, let's say, when it comes to the morality of the Vietnam War. So I think that what we are witnessing today is even just an acceleration of this process, and I don't see in the foreseeable future how this is going to be resolved on a positive note. When it comes to Douglass's feminism, well, according to, let's say, third wave feminists or today's feminists, he would be probably attacked as a bigot and male chauvinist and so on, but which actually did happen. Julie, I think, Jean Watkins, or better known as Bell Hooks, is a very famous African-American feminist, and she was attacking Douglass severely, basically saying that his whole perspective of slavery and of African-American experience was viewed from the lens of a man. And I think this is really unfair to attack somebody who lived in the 19th century,
of course.
Yeah, with the standards of 20th or late 20th and 21st century.
Exactly.
What else did you ask me about Christianity? Or?
I mean, he was a preacher. He was a devout Protestant and very good speaker, very good church speaker. He was a deeply religious individual. and obviously he wouldn't get along very well with those type of human rights activists who are denying and who are condemning Christianity by itself as the core of discrimination and patriarchal society. But what else we can tell about Douglass, comparing him with 20th century African American thinkers like Malcolm X or King?
Well, first of all, when it comes to Christianity,
They're all different. They don't follow the same line of thought and ideology.
they are different, but I would argue that King was actually, in a way, a disciple of Frederick Douglass. But I'll come to that in a bit. I just wanted to say that Douglass said that the Christianity of the South, of the white South, and the Christianity of slave masters was actually anti-Christian, that it was false Christianity, because if a slave master can pray in church on Sundays, and then later on the same day or Monday beat the crap out of his slaves and be absolutely severe and inhumane, that this is actually against the principles of Christianity. And what actually he argued was that the more pious they were, false Christians, of course, and traitors of the Union, as he used to call them, that they were more severe. That the worst slaveholder was a religious, quasi-religious slaveholder. When it comes to comparing Douglass to the two that you mentioned, I would say that Martin Luther King Jr. was actually repeating in a more modern language Douglass's ideas, and I would even say that the most famous "I Have a Dream" speech by Dr. King was a manifesto of Douglass's idea, because King was also insisting on equality, especially equality in front of the law. Whereas Malcolm X was somebody who was rejecting both the white man's law, the law that Douglass actually was praising. He said that the problem was that it's not implemented, not the laws itself. He even argued that the American Constitution, which actually have references to slavery in a metaphor, that even the Constitution is not pro-slavery per se. If we didn't know the context, if it came, from if it came from Mars and fall on the Earth, and somebody would read it, that they would not think that the Constitution was written for a society that has slavery. But Malcolm X rejected both the laws, the Constitution, Declaration of Independence, the whole package, and he rejected Christianity, because he thought that Christianity was a religion of slaves that promises heaven in another life, but suffering in our daily lives, and that actually this was a way for the slave masters to control the slaves. So he saw the exit for African Americans in Islam. But also I have to add that his own personal view of Islam changed over time, because first he was influenced by the Nation of Islam and by their founder Elijah Muhammad. But later on he got disillusioned with him. He realized that the guy was, he created basically a personality cult, and he had a lot of mistresses, women, and a lot of illegitimate children.
Which is non-Islamic. This type of behavior is non-Islamic.
When Malcolm X visited Mecca, this was the
eye-opener for him.
Eye-opener, exactly, because he saw, white Muslims probably coming from our parts, from the Balkans or maybe the Caucasus.
Or Middle Eastern Muslims. of all kinds.
Or yes, of course, Syria and Lebanon, especially, I guess.
Because the
He
population in
saw
the Middle
black
East
men.
is of the mixed race. You have lots of races in the Middle East, from
Absolutely. I mean,
very,
it's a
very
crossroad.
pale skin Arabs to African Arabs,
Absolutely,
due
absolutely.
to
And he saw
historical
this.
experiences.
He saw this racial and ethnic diversity in Mecca, and that all of these people were praying to the same God. So he came back as a changed man. He left the Nation of Islam and started his own career, and was assassinated. And I have a working theory, and I've written this in the book that is coming. This is hypothesis. I cannot claim this because I don't have any material proof of my suspicion. But I think that maybe Dr. King was assassinated as collateral damage of Malcolm X's assassination. Because if Malcolm X became the martyr of the whole of African American people, let's say, that would have been a really big problem, because he was praising nationalism, black nationalism, of course, in particular, but he said that nationalism was what brought emancipation to the peoples of the world, and armed struggle. And he was advocating armed struggle, and he was advocating that African Americans should form a separate territory within the United States that would separate, become a separate country for African Americans. And I think that would have been a big problem for the establishment, predominantly white establishment, of course, but and that maybe King was chosen as a martyr because his ideas were comparable to Douglass's, and they were actually they could be, and they are actually incorporated within the official narrative of the United States.
Yeah, they were both integralists, unlike Malcolm X, who was fighting for
exactly. They thought
secession and
that
physical
yes, I mean there were different
segregation between
ideas.
blacks and whites.
There were different ideas about the future of African Americans after the Civil War. Douglass made 5 scenarios for what might happen and what should happen. And he predicted, in a way, segregation that actually came after, literally 1 year after his life ended. And Douglass thought, that the best outcome would be, of course, immediate equality in front of the law, the right to vote, and the right to get elected for African Americans, and he wanted them to become a part of the society. And he actually said, he had a metaphor that the dust can fly, but the ground stays, meaning that even if some people choose to leave the United States and immigrate somewhere, that the bulk of the African American people will stay there. And that is a good outcome. That is, because first it would be impossible to organize at that time, especially such a huge amount of ships to send millions of people who were born and raised in the United States, who don't have any real connection to Africa. They don't have any data about, let's say, possible relatives.
Of course, their ethnical background, because they came from different parts of Africa, different parts of Western Africa. Mm-hmm. They had different ethnical background, and it's impossible to reconstruct.
Yes, and I mean there was an attempt. There was an attempt with Liberia, because. But what happened in Liberia was a complete disaster, because there were actually instances where freed African American slaves would organize slave trade with the locals, because they had the know-how. They knew how the system functioned, and then even until today there is this tension between the settlers from the United States, with African Americans, and the local population. So this never worked. There were both whites. Lincoln was one of them for a period, and also Madison. And blacks who thought that African Americans should be freed, but actually shipped somewhere else. And this idea, I agree here completely with Douglass. It's not plausible. It doesn't work, and it only creates new miseries down the road.
Yeah, but during current protests, do we have a sharp distinction between Black Lives Matter and more militant groups?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
There is this NFAC, not fucking around coalition. It's a black militia, and their leader is, in my opinion, repeating the words and absolutely mimicking Malcolm X. But he went a step further, because Malcolm X never had his own militia.
True.
And this guy now has at least 1,000 men and women who are well armed. He's basically advocating for a civil war, that African Americans should get Texas, which is unimaginable without a bloody war. And they are denouncing Black Lives Matter. They think that BLM is full of white Trotskyite leftist anarchists.
Infiltrators, white infiltrators, and Trotskyists. Trotskyists are my favorite category. You can hear that from some Serb Americans, and this is very popular hypothesis that actually all neocons are former Trotskyists. It's one of these crazy hypotheses, I would say, conspiracy theories that Trotskyists are infiltrated in every government of the world. So
I have this
Trotsky
metaphor.
would be very happy to see how his ideas are spreading everywhere in every movement.
He would have been delighted. I like this. I've created this division. I mean, we're diverting from the topic. Division. There were Stalinists and Trotskyites before and after Stalin and Trotsky.
Yeah, exactly.
And you can divide the whole history of the world into Stalinists and Trotskyites.
I think some people are mixing up ideological concepts. They're trying to oversimplify Trotskyism and Stalinism, and I don't see any analogy between old school Stalinism or old school Trotskyism and these groups that we are witnessing these days. But it's a simplistic way of looking into the American policy, which is typical for lazy people who don't want to read enough, who base their opinion on YouTube and few articles that they read in their lifetime, and they keep repeating same thesis from 3 or 4 articles that they digested in the last 20 years. But
I mean, in general, I agree with you, but also I think simplifications are sometimes good for us to actually, put things into categories and contexts. Of course, there are parallels with the ideologies of the past, but it is ridiculous to say that somebody is a Stalinist or Trotskyite or Hitlerian or Winston Churchillian or whatever without these people being around. So every time actually some idea is reconstructed, it is a new thing.
True. True.
When it comes
it's a very dynamic process.
Absolutely, no doubt about that. And when it comes to BLM, I think that if I would say that if there's one word that would define this whole very heterogeneous, very hard to define movement is probably emotion, because I think that there's that a lot of these protests and then evening riots are driven by emotion, are driven by this
Social
overarching.
grievances. What do you think about social grievances that are behind these protests? Are they justified or imported from
I think the
exponents of the deep state? Because deep state is also explanation for everything, according to their mindset. If if my refrigerator doesn't work, it's because of the deep state.
It's because of the deep freezing.
Yeah, of course. They live in a deep freezer, exactly.
Well, yes. Again, I think that that the grievances are very real. I think that they have been built up for decades, if not centuries. I think that the African Americans as a community have good reasons to be, let's say, dissatisfied with their lives. But I also think that the same goes for the working class whites.
Exactly. Yes.
That lost their jobs, and this is another thing that I think is being repeated in American history. Both Frederick Douglass, he was when he was still a slave, he was rented as a worker in Baltimore harbor. And he got beaten by white workers because they were dissatisfied that he does the same amount of work for less money. So they saw him as him and other blacks who were doing the same as competition. Although the bulk of the money that he actually got, he had to give to his slave master. And then, so what Douglass said was that the interests of whites and black workers are the same, but the color and the prejudice is not letting the whites to realize this. The same thing was absolutely the same thought came from William Du Bois, who witnessed the 1919 racial unrest in the United States. So basically what happened was that white soldiers, about 1 million Americans, were sent to World War I. And they were replaced by blacks from the South. So what the capitalists did, I mean, this leads to kind of a Marxist argument. What the capitalists did, they hired black workers and they paid them less. So once the whites came back from the war, first of all, a lot of them didn't have the job because their places were filled. And if they got the jobs back, their salary was lower compared to what they left. And after the war, of course, they thought they should be rewarded and not punished in their own homeland. So the riots broke out. And what he said was that this is being done by the capitalists, and that actually, if they were any smart, both whites and blacks, they would join their forces and form unions and strike against
capitalists.
Yeah, and I don't know, in a maybe more sophisticated way, maybe we are witnessing something similar today, because when you see who is funding BLM. There's a lot of corporations.
Of course, big capital. I would say the big capital.
Yeah, so you can say that maybe, I mean, there are multiple explanations, that maybe they're sucking up to them, so please don't ruin my Target in this neighborhood, or my Walmart, or whatever, or Apple shop. But there is another explanation that we are witnessing a restructuring of economy in general. What Eric Hobsbawm was saying, he said that the future is very grim because the machines are going to take over more and more of human jobs, and that there will be a problem with a lot of people who are unemployed and who are not able to do anything. So now people are already, because of this lockdown, getting used to working or not working, but being at home all the time. A lot of negative energy is being
generating, of course, because
generated,
people work
accumulated.
harder, they work longer working hours, and their wages are getting
Exactly.
lower and lower. And now with this
Exactly.
pandemic, they're going to use COVID-19 to cut all kinds of professions, and in the meantime, they're going to push different ethnic groups
let me
on
give
each
you an
other.
example.
Yes,
let me give you an example that has nothing to do with African Americans, with America in general. At the beginning of the civil war in Ukraine, the volunteers from both sides, if you would do a social survey, I think that they would agree with each other, the warring sides, 99%. They were both against oligarchy, one's in Ukraine, the others in Russia, against corruption, against this, against that. They were nationalists at the same time. Even the ultra hardcore Ukrainian nationalists, some of them are actually, when you think about it deeper, they are actually greater Russian nationalists, which is maybe strange for somebody in the West to hear that.
Yeah, for people who don't understand the history of the Eastern
exactly.
Europe.
I mean, these people sometimes say that Russia took the name from them, and they're the real Russians. I mean, this is why I see the war in Ukraine as a Russians against Russians civil war.
It's a fratricide. It's a typical fratricide.
What absolutely.
In Russia is a fratricide.
Why I mentioned this? Because there were some videos that you mentioned YouTube.
not in Russia. I made a mistake. What we witness in Eastern Ukraine is typical fratricide. Most of them are also Greek Orthodox or Russian Orthodox. So you don't have
they're Russian speakers.
And they're Russian speakers. You don't have even the religious components like in Balkan Wars, where we have de facto the same ethnic group split in 3 different confessions, and from these confessions, somehow they form the national identity. But in Ukraine, it's even more ridiculous than in the Balkans.
Yeah, it's more ridiculous. I mean, there were so many components. You would have Russian nationalists from St. Petersburg coming to fight on the side of the Ukrainian forces, and there were volunteers from Western Ukraine who were actually the Uniate Christians, they're Greco-Catholics, as they call themselves, who would fight for the Donbass, the pro-Russian forces. I mean, it's a complete mess. But let's leave this alone. I only mentioned it because of this racial class thing in America. So basically, the interests of majority of African Americans and a majority of blue collar whites in America are the same, I think. And I think actually Trump was trying to play this card, but the Democratic establishment is not letting him. And also the blacks are not, the majority of them do not, they don't have any confidence in him, especially because of his history with those 4 black kids who were accused of murder, and then that he was later on. It was found that they were not guilty, but he was against them. So a lot of blacks are holding the grudge, plus the media and all of that. So
fake media.
So maybe. Coming back to the argument made by Frederick Douglass and William Du Bois about the interests of white workers and blacks being actually the same, maybe something of that kind is happening now. I mean, of course, this is a speculation, and I can't really claim that this is happening, but I have really big doubts about that. Because I'm really skeptical about why is the corporate America giving so much money to a protest that has a violent component in it.
What do you think about upcoming elections? In 2 weeks' time, we're going to have the new or old president. I haven't.
I think these elections are. Really going to define the future of the US and maybe of the world, because I don't think that neither side, whatever happened on the election, will recognize the results. If Trump wins, there will be a total outbreak of protests and so on. If he loses, then maybe some people will not recognize that as well. Maybe him. What happened in recently? We had Jim Jatras at our institute, Institute of European Studies, where I work. Jatras was an American diplomat and staffer at State Department, I believe, and he said that what happened in Florida in 2000 could happen now in 13 states. That the elections are disputed because of the early voting and the voting via mail. That these votes can be manipulated, and he argues that the Democratic Party is organizing a fraud. That's what Trump actually said as well. So I think either way, whatever happens, first of all, we might come with a situation where we don't know the result, the official result of the elections for weeks after the. Usually, the result the same night. But as you remember from Florida in 2000, there was 2 or 3 months of
they were speculating for longer than 1 week.
Yes, and this
about the outcome of elections
lasted forever. But if something like that happens in more than one, if it happens in 13 states or 10,
it would be a major disaster.
Yes, and this is not this is not something that we should count off, because the tensions are high. I think that the sides are motivated to engage in fraud because the cause, whatever it is bigger than democracy itself. You have armed guerrilla groups already. I mean, they call themselves militias, but it's they're like guerrilla.
Paramilitary groups.
Paramilitary groups, especially on the pro-Trump side. And if these guys think that because their narrative is constantly that they are protecting the Constitution and Second Amendment. The Second Amendment is actually protecting the First Amendment. Meaning that they have the right to bear arms and form a well-regulated militia, as the Constitution says.
Yeah, like in 1770s.
Yeah, and I think that these people, if they think that there was a big fraud, then we might have pockets of resistance, pockets of civil war in America. I think that the United States is already mentally in the state of civil war. I mean, people don't see their opponents as political opponents now, but as enemies. And I think this is really dangerous when this comes to a society. No matter what laws you have, if there is no consensus within the society that we respect these laws because of A, B, and C, if we cannot argue, if we cannot agree what A, B, and C are in our society, then we can't talk about the functioning society anymore. And what is problem with this possibility of a new of the new civil war? It will look more as one of those zombie TV
apocalyptic
series.
Films.
Yeah, I mean, because you wouldn't have American civil war iconography from the 1860s. There won't be two standing armies with a front line, and one is in one are gray, the other are blue. I think this can really be apocalyptic. You could have different militias with different ideologies
within the same building.
It won't even be. People are
within the same neighborhood.
People are oversimplifying, saying that this might be a race war. Yes, partially, but I can easily imagine, ragtag militias who are mixed, who are, I can see black conservatives with whites and all. Also, I mean, okay, let's take this group called the Proud Boys. Their Miami branch leader is 40% African American. He's a Cuban, actually. And they call them white supremacists. Maybe partially this group is that when it comes to values. But then how can you say that if most of their members in Florida are Latinos? So this is a postmodern conflict, and it's fought. I think the front lines are in heads of people more than on the terrain.
On the ground,
this is a completely new breed of warfare, let's say. And I mean, I probably I would sound terrible,
very
especially
apocalyptic.
in the United States.
I personally I don't think it will happen. I still believe that the central government agencies, army, can contain all kinds of militias and paramilitaries, and they can pacify the situation if they want to.
No, I absolutely agree with you. But the problem is the problem that I see here is the mental war happening within the institutions, within the Homeland Security, within the CIA, within FBI, the Pentagon, and so on. You can't really say what the American foreign policy is. I remember an occasion where Trump was saying something, I can't really recall it. He was saying something peaceful about Syria. Then the next day you had the Americans bombing and some drones. Yeah, and then some drones were attacking the Khmeimim Russian air base. I mean, where is the chain of command? Does it exist anymore? And are there different, let's say, centers of power?
Of course there are. I don't think the president and his team have unlimited power. You have lots of checks within the U.S. Political institutions, and army is also the state within the state. I know that lots of my friends from the U.S. and from the West would diminish what I just said, but we can see from many examples in the history of American interventionism that army played a major role. As every global empire, and the U.S. is the most global and the most powerful empire in the history, the military plays very significant, if not the major role. So I don't think that they're going to start a civil war. We may have this type of protest for coming months. After elections in 2016, we remember that supporters of Hillary Clinton also complained, and they protested. Lots of public figures and celebrities threatened that they will travel to Canada and leave the US, and none of them left the American soil, which is very similar. It's also very similar to Serbian opposition. Each time the current prime minister or president, because he rotates these positions each time it suits him, wins, they say they're going to travel to continue their illustrious careers in the US or in Western Europe. But unfortunately, most of them remain in Serbia. So anyway.
Well, I mean, I partly agree with you. I don't think that on November 4th, at 12 a.m.
Yeah, exactly.
We won't have a result, and we'll say, okay, now we start a civil war.
Yeah, it won't happen.
Let's start killing it. It won't be like that. I think that what might happen over time is that these instances of southern brutality, lone wolf shooters, people snapping, in their brain, and then deciding to do some crazy thing on their own. I think that these kind of events can.
It may happen. It may
become more frequent.
It may become triggered by the outcome of elections. Yes.
And what I'm saying is that this can create this
might be triggered.
Loss of sensitivity for the value of human life.
Of course.
And that people start thinking about their political opponents even more as enemies that should be destroyed. And okay, I don't care that let's say 100 conservatives die, or I don't care that 100 liberals die. The people can start thinking in these terms.
True.
And this is really dangerous. So of course, I think if there's let's say a Waco situation like in 1993, that federal government will come and crush it.
Of course.
I have no doubts about that. But the thing is that in the long run, that the United States is leaning toward some kind of dystopian future, which can be very long and very prolonged. It can last for decades. And I don't see the moment. There is this famous speech that Lincoln gave just before the Civil War. It's called the House Divided speech. He said the House is divided within itself cannot stand. But then the Civil War actually solved this problem. Well, maybe somebody can say it never really solved it. There was always this grudge that was held in the South, and they still wave with the Confederate flags and all of that. But actually, I mean, the society came back to normal, whatever normal was at the time, and it functioned. But now there is no simple solution. Not even war would be a solution to the problems that Americans have now. And also, I think that that communications and technology is also making things harder. There is no monopoly on propaganda anymore. There's no state propaganda. If you, let's say, have certain views, you can always find like-minded people on the internet and not care about what the media is saying. So, after World War II, an overarching narrative could be told to the Western Germans, and then another one to the Eastern Germans, let's say, or to the Brits, and every society would have something. Now, let me use the example of former Yugoslavia. I mean, it's been 25 years since the end of the war, right? Yeah. And still, Serbs going to Croatia with a car should think twice if they park their car on the wrong spot in Split, that the car can get smashed. And 25 years after World War II was 1970, right?
Almost, it was in 1970, yeah.
Yeah, and in 1970 we had German tourists, all over the Adriatic coast, and nobody would bother them because of the occupation. So the thing is that I think that
this is because of the narrative.
Prolonging the narrative.
Yeah. In our case, the narrative remained the same after 30 years. If you open any Croatian channel, you will think that we are in 1991, not in 2020. If you open federal TV programs from Sarajevo, the same thing. So certain level of animosity is always kept in the mainstream media, and they use every opportunity to steer the memory of the Civil War, the memory of the World War II, because we have people who are still talking about partisan Chetniks. Tito is dead for 40 years. They're still talking about Tito.
Yeah, I mean, well, maybe something similar to a lesser extent exists in Spain, especially in the last couple of years with the Catalonian crisis, and then with this demand. I don't know whether they did it or not to move the body of El Caudillo. What's his name? Francisco Franco.
Yeah, they want to. They actually exhumated his body and they put him in the civil cemetery, in a private crypt. Because
but I mean,
the legacy of Franco is still controversial in Spain. Those are controversial topics. Those are civil wars and civil strifes that continue from generation to generation. And they're still talking about the civil war between South and North, slavery and Jim Crow laws from the period of segregation, which is actually the continuation of racism in some form. So
actually, in some ways, it was even worse.
Of course,
that was
it was created by Southern Democrats. So whoever supports Democrat Party and attacks Trump should also keep in their mind that members of Democrat Party until 1970s were mostly racial bigots. if we talk about white.
Democratic Party was the pro-slavery party. I mean,
Exactly.
the candidate of Democrats fighting again in the election against Abraham Lincoln, Stephen Douglas, was a Democrat, and Lincoln was a Republican.
True.
So, I mean, and now we have this inverted reality for the last.
It's inverted, of course. Democrat Party back in 19th century or in 1950s is a different organization, and they have different membership, but the history of Democrat Party wasn't always pro-emancipation, pro-abolition, and pro-human rights. It's it's a new narrative, new invention, and I'd like to ask you for the end, how would you undermine the presidency of Donald Trump? Now we know what he did in the last 4 years, in 2015, 2016. First of all, many of us didn't believe that he would become the new president. One of my friends in Belgrade was the only person I've known who predicted that he's going to be in a race. He didn't, of course, even he didn't predict that he'll win the election against Hillary Clinton. But that guy was the only person who predicted his rise to power. How would you evaluate his presidency?
Well, speaking about 2016, I thought that he might have a good chance to win because of his whole narrative that is actually also playing on the emotions. You know, emotions of whites, but not only whites. There was this very good analogy in South Park with member berries. So member berries, if you eat them, then you become nostalgic, and they would say, "Oh, remember when this was member this, member that." So I think that Trump won because of the member berries, but also I think he might win again because
I wouldn't write him off. Lots of people jump into conclusion, and they're very convinced that this senile idiot Biden.
I think he might win because of the internalized, interiorized censorship.
Yeah, I've never seen worse candidates in my life than Biden and Trump. Each time,
no, exactly. I mean,
this is the
I mean,
in 2024. Wait and see 2024. What kind of freaks they're going to
I think for people from Serbia watching, I think the analogy with Trump is similar to the Serbian Radical Party after 2000. So nobody except for the hardliners would admit that they are voting for radicals, but then all of a sudden these guys had 1/3 of the seats in parliament. And I think that this is even more extreme in the United States. Can you imagine that you are, let's say, a librarian at some university in US, admitting that you are pro-Trump would probably be a social suicide because
there's a lot of stigma. You'll be ostracized immediately.
Yes.
From the academic community. True, although I met a couple of academics who come from so-called Hickland, and they admitted that their relatives from Arkansas voted for Trump, and he actually tried to justify motives why they gave their votes to Donald Trump, although he didn't admit that he voted for Donald Trump. So he put the blame on his relatives. He said, "Yeah, all my relatives voted for Donald Trump," but he didn't mention whether he voted for him or not. And he gave all kinds of explanations, the whole list, why they feared the Washington administration, Washington bureaucrats, why they fear intellectual elites on both coasts who don't understand the grievances and problems in Arkansas and other rural areas. So you have such cases. They appear from time to time.
Speaking about Trump's 4 years, I don't think he did really much. I don't think he actually delivered on the promises that he gave to his own voters. But I think that partially this, let's say, political impotence comes because of the, let's say, subversion that he has from the system itself. He in 4 years could not really control. He never really took control over the State Department, because we see same policies being implemented. Also, on certain issues, Trump is more liberal than, let's say, Obama in foreign policy, because society has changed so significant over time that now some things are not even considered debatable, and I think that Trump did not deliver, but what he still has is a promise, and I think that's his greatest card for his supporters, and he has what he or Bannon, or I don't know who created this, but they have created a parallel campaign, which I think is brilliant when it comes from the standpoint of political technology. All of these fringe movements, like the QAnons, and so that are not really directly connected to Trump, but in effect support him. I think this is the really good way to combat the mainstream media with asymmetrical weapon. Let's use weapons. Yeah. Let's use this this terminology. And I think that that things like that and grievances and also let's say this tiredness, this that comes from both the lockdowns and protests, especially for the people who are against the protests or who live in dangerous neighborhoods that are affected by riots. I think these factors can really help Trump. And regardless of whether he wins or loses this election, I think that all the pollsters will be surprised with the numbers that he has. So even if he loses, I think he will lose with a smaller margin than predicted. Mm-hmm. And if he wins, then again, everybody's going to be shocked. How did this happen? Americans are so bigoted. They say one thing before the elections, but do another thing in
I know one thing. Serb Americans will vote for Trump. Lots of Serb
Albanians will vote for Biden.
Yeah. Many of them were very happy with his first term. They praise his economic policies and how he fought with unemployment. This is what they say. I have other sources who claim otherwise. But I personally don't think that foreign policy will be dramatically changed. We haven't seen that in the first mandate. We're not going to see it in 10th.
He didn't start a single war, and I praise him for that, because if Hillary won, I think we would have chaos in Syria right now.
True, although he's meddling in the Middle Eastern peace process, and he's very pro-Zionist and pro-Netanyahu. Mm-hmm. Stand further complicated the situation in the region, and
pro-Saudi.
Yeah, from my perspective, he additionally complicated already very complex and dangerous situation in the Middle East. But if Serb Americans are very happy with him, who I am to disagree with them? Exactly. I think Serb Americans are probably the most informed and visionary circle of people who live in this multi-ethnic and multiracial society. And of course, they always bet on the right horse. So if
Serb Americans are,
I think Biden
has one spot, right?
Yeah, I think Biden has realistic chances to win if they support Trump 100%. usually they're like jinxes. If they support one side, they must lose.
But remember, they supported Trump 4 years ago and he won. So
I'm just joking. But some of these analysts are real jinxes, and they always hex whoever they support, whether it's Donald Trump or Novak Djokovic. I would be more afraid of them if I were Novak Djokovic. I would be more afraid of some of them giving predictions who's going to win the most Grand Slams than being afraid of Nadal or Federer, because he may get some.
Yeah, I claim
injury.
that our former president Tomislav Nikolic was bad luck for Novak Djokovic.
It was bad luck for all kinds of athletes in Rio. Thank God he's not on any official function. He's retired and he cannot travel around the world and jinx our athletes. And I would stop here. We had a very nice conversation, and we can continue talking about the U.S. politics after November elections.
Absolutely, it will be my pleasure.
And we're going to continue our talk about African American political thinkers next time in Serbia.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.